You know, I was thinking about wearing a hoodie, but I wouldn't look nearly as good in it. Luke Cage. All right, I'm getting this out a few days after most people who tend to do these sorts of things because I don't have the time or the energy to binge it through in 2 or 3 days. But I have seen the entirety of the series of Luke Cage, and I did it quickly enough that I think I'm still worth talking about it. So, what did I think? It's pretty good. I mean, for my part, there are things that just didn't quite work for me, some of which I can chalk up to personal taste, some of which I think are actually kind of issues. So let me be upfront about the fact that this was one of those things where I can watch it and I can appreciate what is good and what works about it, and at the same time recognize that while it's not completely connecting to me, that's probably because I'm not completely lining up with the ideal audience for this thing. I mean, I don't mean to make this a race thing. I don't mean to make this a white-black thing, but as a point of comparison, I think of when I saw something like Straight Outta Compton, which was a very good movie, and I'm glad I saw it. I would never go back and watch it again, and I didn't overly connect with it, but it's because that's never really been my world. And I don't just mean the black experience. I mean, I'm not really into hip-hop either, but I can still recognize that it was a good movie and see the strengths in it while still not really latching onto it on a personal level, and simply recognize that that's not any fault of the movie, or in this case, the TV show. And I feel there's a certain amount of that going on here as well. But I like to start positive, so let's talk about what worked. Well, Luke Cage worked. He worked before when we saw him in Jessica Jones. He works here. He's still good. I mean, he looks stellar. He just looks so good. Just standing there, he's just so big and muscular, and he's taking the hits But, you know, even when he has to engage and actually talk to people, and he's got this wonderful corny rapport with so many of the characters, and it even gets pointed out to him, usually by Rosario Dawson, how corny and cheesy he is, so that they kind of hung a lampshade on it. I like that, and I like his whole deal. I like his vibe. He was good. Most of the supporting cast is really good. Pop was good for the brief period he was around. Oh, I guess I'll mention spoilers. I'm not going to consider it a big spoiler that Pop dies. Who did not call that Pop was going to die? But from here on out, we'll say spoilers. You got my general overview. So going on from that, you know, we got the return of Rosario Dawson. She's always been good. I'm iffy on the fact that they seem to be pointing towards kind of a romantic angle between her and Luke, but I'm iffy on that almost any time it happens, regardless of who does. And as far as the two of them, you know what? It's not too bad. I really liked Misty Knight. I liked how human she was, that she was a badass and a good detective, but at the same time, she's vulnerable and she is subject to the stress, and you see it wearing on her at certain points, and certain just mistakes that she makes just in her police work, because she's so frustrated with this system and everything that it's not doing. I liked Cottonmouth a whole lot. He was charismatic as heck. I really liked Mariah Dillard. She was fantastic. I mean, really one of the highlights of the show as a whole for me, and in terms of her progression and the performance in general, she was great. I actually, surprisingly, really liked Shades. And I don't say surprisingly like I expected the character to be crap, but you tell me there's a character named Shades, I'm like, that's gotta be a non-entity. I really liked him. So there's a lot of good characters being put in here. There's a lot of good interactions. There's a lot of good performances. But as a whole, it still didn't come together for me. And if I sort of set aside the issue of I can't quite connect because it's not my experience, and it's just not a genre type that it's working in that is normally what I gravitate towards. Even if I set that aside, there are sort of basic issues that I kind of have a problem with. For the vast majority of the show, it never really felt like Luke Cage was up against much. It felt like the main thing holding him back was he himself. And when I say that, I mean, basically until we get to the very end and we get some of the more jacked up tech that can actually take him down, for the first half, almost 2/3 of the series, it never feels like he's being threatened. I mean, yes, it's established that people around him can get hurt, the community can be injured by what's going on, even though he's bulletproof, but it feels like the only reason that the series isn't only 4 episodes long is because he has decided he's not going to kill these people. And that's fine as far as it goes, but I feel like we didn't get a proper justification for why he won't take that step. I needed something. I needed just a line, a speech. I think I needed a speech. I needed a full justification for why he was not prepared to just kill him. Because if he had just gone in and killed Cottonmouth and said, anyone else who tries to fill the vacuum he left is going to answer to me, show would have been over and that would have been it. And the fact that, it strings out because he's not willing to do that, that's fine, but you need to explain to me why he's not. And I get that he's not a killer by nature, but like, it would have solved things so easily. I needed something. I needed an acknowledgement that he is accepting there will be damage by the fact that he won't kill these people. And I need to understand his justification as to why, and I feel like I never got that. The other thing with the villains is we get a villain shift about halfway through, and we get the elimination of Cottonmouth. And I do want to single out sort of that whole thing. That was amazing because they took something with what he said to, because obviously it's established him and Mariah, they're cousins, they grew up together, they are close, but he says something to her that is something that is so common, not just in entertainment but in reality, to be said when a woman, the abuse of a woman is brought up, and he says, you wanted it. And when she just flips on him, and I don't mean just like she gets angry and shoots him and goes, oh my god, what did I do? She hits him with a bottle, pushes him out a window, goes down the stairs, and smashes his face in with a mic stand, the whole time screaming, I didn't want it. Wow, that was good. That was intense. That was a great transition point for her. The problem is they tried to fill the vacuum left by Cottonmouth with Diamondback, and Diamondback, he never really worked for me. Well, no, I won't say never. When he first showed up and he's pulling lines from the Warriors, that was actually a very cool introduction to the character. But then, like, the more we learn about him, and he grew up with Luke Cage, and he's out for revenge because he's been jealous since they were kids, and he's actually his brother, and I don't care. I mean, it would have worked much better if there had been more references to him in the beginning. I don't mean the name drops of Diamondback, because those were all in the first half. I mean, like, if Luke had made some mention of, his friend growing up, that, boy, I wonder whatever happened to him. Or I had this friend and we were so close, but then this thing happened. Like, something I could connect it with. Instead, this guy just shows up out of nowhere and goes, yeah, you remember me? I'm your brother. And I'm like, who the hell are you? And so I was put off foot like immediately when he showed up, and I could never quite get on board with him since then. And the outfit they put him in for the climactic fight, not a good outfit. And actually the action scenes in general aren't that spectacular, which is kind of a disappointment. You would have the assault, when he takes out that whole facility, that was good, but that's the action highlight. The rest of the fights in this thing are kind of dull. And I think by and large, most of my issues center around the villains in some way. In the first half, I have a problem with the fact that the villains never really feel like they're a proper threat to Luke Cage, and yet he won't take them out. And then in the second half, we have Diamondback, who does feel like a proper threat, but doesn't feel properly justified as a villain in terms of what he's doing, because I always have issue with the whole discongruity that happens when you have a character who has obviously had the patience and the skill or whatever to work his way up high into the ranks of organized crime and never be caught and have discretion, to suddenly just be having fights out in the open and killing his partners and doing all this because he's got revenge in his sights. But like, how did he keep that under wraps for however many years he had to work his way up just to blow it all on revenge? I'm not gonna say I can't buy that somebody could be that petty, but there's a disconnect there between somebody who's able to rise that high in the ranks and someone who will jeopardize all of that just for a little bit of revenge. You run into, and that's not unique to this. Spectre basically did the same thing with Blofeld, and it didn't work there either. So it's weird to me that most of my issues with the series center around the villains, because villains have been the one area up until this point that the Netflix shows have really outshined the movies. Fisk was amazing. Kilgrave was fantastic. And I don't want to sound like the villains are a complete wash here. Again, I really like Mariah Diller. I'm glad she's still around by the end of this. I liked Cottonmouth for when he stuck around. Diamondback really didn't work for me though, and even though I liked Cottonmouth as a performance, he still wasn't completely working as a villain, and I think, aside from that thing that I talked about before, just not completely connecting with the vibe of the thing, and again, I don't blame the show for that. I chalk that up to just, okay. Cultural difference, it's not my life, it's not my world. It's going for a style of entertainment that isn't normally what I gravitate for, and that's fine. But between those two things, it was good. I probably won't rewatch it. But those are my thoughts on Luke Cage. I'm definitely looking forward to seeing Luke himself again come back in The Defenders. So I'm not tired of this guy, but I don't know how excited I'll be for a second season of this particular show. But you know what? We'll see. In any case, have you seen the entirety of Luke Cage yet? And if you have, what did you think about it? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments and let's talk about it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, check me out on Twitter at Council of Geeks. Check out the Council of Geeks podcast, available on iTunes and Stitcher. And until next time, this council is adjourned.